final grand push. 30,000 extremely elite Ukrainians are preparing to engage. There was also a very big breakthrough in the south as Ukrainian special forces landed in Crimea and engaged in combat activities with Russians. And to say that Russians are panicking is basically to say nothing, and reportedly some of them started evacuating from Tokmak. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So yeah, we have this 70-year-old Babushka, and she mentioned that her 51-year-old son, he was drafted to the Russian army last year, and then he basically never contacted her ever again. Just so recently, some unknown punks using Belgian numbers in WhatsApp called her. They said that they are Ukrainians and they have her son in their captivity. And in case she wants her son to be back home alive and well, she will need to take Molotov cocktail and set on fire one of military enlistment offices. And instead of following the orders of these filthy Ukrainians, our battle Babushka, she went to the police and made this story publicly available for ridiculous Russian propaganda. And as of right now, the current condition and whereabouts of her son is still unknown. But I mean, that is not important. What is important is that Ukrainians once again were shown as evil people on Russian federal channels. Okay, so now let's briefly talk about 30,000 mega elite Ukrainians preparing to join the war, and then I'll give you a quick update from the east of Ukraine, and then we'll finalize everything in the south. And so yes, according to the British ambassador to Ukraine, Martin Harris, he's mentioning that his country is planning to train more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers to be extremely effective combatants, pretty much extremely mega, ridiculously powerful elite forces. And even though right now Ukrainians are in the middle of their counteroffensive, they continue to receive life-changing military vehicles from the West, they obviously still need to human force, because these are the majority of people, the ones who are making actual progress in the war. And as soon as these Ukrainians are back in their country with the military experience from the highest military officials and the biggest professionals in this field, they will obviously would want to practice their newly obtained skills. And besides obviously fighting in Ukraine, they will also be training their comrades, pretty much geometrically increasing the number of highly skilled soldiers fighting for Ukraine. And besides that, Ukrainian engineers recently developed this invisibility cloak, pretty much literally. This will be mainly used by, once again, Ukrainian special forces and mostly snipers. And what it makes it invisibility cloak is that whenever you're using thermal camera, you're pretty much indistinguishable from the surrounding environment, as you can see from this video. In addition to that, America recently also intercepted Iranian weapons on their way to Yemen in the number of thousands, and they will be using this almost contraband to supply them to Ukrainians, also to help them in this war. And speaking about America, this country along with Ukrainian engineers will start producing super modern air defense systems on the territory of Ukraine, which will significantly decrease the logistics time. But so yes, now let's go to the east of Ukraine, where the record number of Russian military equipment has been destroyed, and then we'll go to the south of the country, where Ukrainian special forces landed in Crimea. But first of all, before we go there, if you don't mind and if you like this style of daily updating, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel? This does help a lot. Thank you so much. You can also follow me on Instagram to see how I live outside of YouTube, and I'll also send you sometimes memes. The link is down below. And before we go to the actual east of Ukraine, allow me to make an extremely quick stop in Belgrade, because this is exactly where Ukrainians recently destroyed an extremely expensive S-400 missile complex of Russians. And according to some very rough estimations, the price of this air defense system can reach up to $1.2 billion. But in addition to that, a local factory in Krasnoyarsk was also spotted to be on fire. This was a factory producing aluminum, and as always it was related to some military orders. So the source of fire, as you would imagine, is still unknown. Most likely it is just spontaneous ignition. And now let's go to the actual Ukraine and refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians and Ukrainians continue their combat activities along Kupiansk, Svatove, Crimea frontline, and Russians even made unreported and unconfirmed small gains along this front line, while Ukrainians were mainly focusing their attention next to Bakhmut. And interestingly enough, Ukrainians continued to use the fake decoy military equipment to just make Russians waste their drones and missiles. And Russians, believe it or not, they still continue to think that they are destroying actual military targets, as you can see from this video. But in the meantime, Ukrainians destroy actual military equipment of Russians, such as for example these two demining vehicles called UR-77, and most likely, at least by the shockwave, it looks like that Ukrainians used HIMARS, because it is a complete devastation. And as always guys, if you want to see fully uncensored episodes of the Russian Duty, you are more than welcome to join our Patreon community, starting only as little as $4 for the entire month. And this is literally the best way to support the channel in my fight against YouTube censorship. The link is down below. There is 1 week of free access to see for yourself if you like it or not. Thank you so much. And just in general, the so-called Ukrainian army of drones in this one last month of September was able to destroy 140 Russian tanks and 270 artillery units, and these are just the ones which are 100% confirmed. And if we take the total number of destroyed military equipment and human force which we were able to eliminate, this number is already close to 793. So as you can pretty much see, the modern warfare definitely switched to unmanned aerial vehicles, while Russians are still relying mostly on just plain human force. The very basic same tactics that they used pretty much forever. And so yes, now let me give you a similar quick update from the south of Ukraine before we talk about Ukrainian special forces landing in Crimea, and trust me, this is a significant event. And so first of all we go to Zaporozhye frontline, and according to the Ukrainian General Staff, they basically claim that Ukrainians are being particularly successful recently in the West Robotyne region, located right here. Besides that, for the last several weeks Ukrainians have been also actively pushing next to Novoprokopivka to the south and to the Verbovy to the east of the same area, and also obviously doing long-range artillery and missile attacks against cities such as for example Tokmak, or at least to the areas close to this settlement. And as a result of this, according to the Ukrainian intelligence, they see that Russians started to quote-unquote evacuating from Tokmak. And obviously the very first priority for them are not the civilians who are they so eager to protect in this war. The very first priority people for the evacuation are the local infiltrators, local quote-unquote authorities and their families. This information has also been confirmed by the legitimate Ukrainian mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, who also pretty much sees these movements by Russians. And I mean, just think about it. Russians came to another country. They destroy every single settlement they are fighting in. And whenever there is something bad about to happen, all they think about is by protecting themselves, evacuating and retreating as fast as possible. My question to you guys is the following. Do you think Russians actually care about liberating and protecting Ukrainians from Ukrainians? Let me know in the comments. But on the positive note, as you can see from this map, this is the approximate location of all the important military objects of Russians located on the occupied Ukraine, such as military headquarters, concentration of forces, and just other big major camps. And if Ukraine can already reach as deep as all the way to the south of Crimea and attack military headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Navy in Sevastopol, so basically it means that all the other objects on the territory of occupied Ukraine are also within the range for Ukrainians. And Russians, they do know this as well. That is why they continue to take away their military vessels from the ports in Crimea, specifically from Sevastopol, and bring them all the way to the territory of Russia. For example, port in Novorossiysk, as you can see from these satellite images, confirming the arrival of the Russian ships, submarines and other boats. But wait, there is more. Because the most significant event of the last 24 hours also happened in Crimea, in its western part, where the Ukrainian special forces, under the directions by the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, they did land on the western part of the peninsula. They even shared with us this video of Ukrainian boats approaching Crimea, then they're disembarking, entering the land, and even engaging Russians in combat activities. But unfortunately, there are also reportedly losses from the Ukrainian side. But according to the Defense Intelligence, these losses are significantly lower than those losses of Russians. Because first of all, obviously, this raid was absolutely unexpected for Russians, and I mean just overall, the defenses of Russians are not as good as, well, at this point I don't think anyone thinks they're good, right? Besides that, Ukrainians took pictures and recorded a video with their flag on the Ukrainian Crimean soil, just to obviously lift the spirits and expectations of the rest of Ukrainian army. But unfortunately, once again, whenever they started retreating, besides losses, there is also still not yet 100% confirmed report that at least one Ukrainian soldier was being captured as Russians, as the prisoner of war as we speak. Most likely this information is unfortunately true, but just once again, there is no yet 100% confirmation, so as soon and if I know something more, I will make sure to report on this one as well. But the fact is the fact, this was yet another successful raid against Crimea by Ukrainians, and Russians were not able to pretty much do anything. They were not able to spot the Ukrainian boats, they were not able to stop them while they were getting closer to the peninsula, they were not able to stop them landing on Crimea itself, and they were only engaged in the combat activities when the landing actually happened. So now just imagine if Ukrainians, they bring way more soldiers to reinvade, to recapture Crimea, what will Russians do in this case? Unfortunately, according to John Kirby, the time might not be at this point on Ukrainian side. In fact, it might not be on anyone's side, because the winter is coming, and Ukraine approximately has maybe 6 to 8 more weeks to do some significant advancements, whether it is in the east or in the south, because then it will be obviously cold, the roads will be not as possible for tanks or other machine to drive through them, and so just overall the combat activities during winter period, they slow down. But this also means another thing, that now Ukrainians, they feel this pressure of time, so they need to act as soon as possible. And most likely, in the very near future, we will see some of these activities coming into the reality, and we see some major liberations and major movements by Ukrainian army. And if you don't want to miss any of these events as soon as they start happening, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support, and see you tomorrow.